Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf. Welcome to the podcast. Today's podcast is actually from our Articulate conference, a conversation I had on stage about restaurant robotics with Sean Lang of Lab2Fab, a division of Middleby, a big equipment company that provides equipment to restaurants, and Dave Zito of Miso Robotics, which makes Flippy, the hamburger flipping robot. And it was really a conversation about installing, integrating at scale robotics into restaurants. The messy work of it, how do you deploy to big restaurant chains that already have big workforces? And so just really looking at how you make it all work, because it's not such a simple concept. It's not such a simple thing. If you are looking at existing restaurant chains and installing robotics into these, what are all the implications and how do you make it work? So that was what the conversation was about. It was a really interesting conversation, so I thought I would share it with you in the podcast. As always, if you are interested in this topic, follow The Spoon, go to thespoon.tech, and also come to Smart Kitchen Summit because we'll be talking about restaurant robotics, and you can use the discount code podcast to get a nice 25% off tickets. Go to smartkitchensummit.com. All right, guys, here's the conversation with Sean and David.
Well, I'm glad to have this conversation because, when I go and look at restaurants and I think about dropping in robotics into like a McDonald's or a Denny's, like it almost seems easier like to kind of envision something like a Spice, right? Or something where it's just kind of completely greenfield and you don't have to like plug into an existing workflow. So, Sean, I'm sure this is something you think a lot about, and Dave as well, working in high-volume restaurants, thinking about how to apply robotics. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is plugging into an existing high-volume workflow, like a McDonald's, with robotics a very difficult task?
We were just talking about this.
Yeah, we were.
Backstage here. It's definitely more difficult. Greenfield is easier to attack. It's easier to innovate. It's easier to set up the kitchen so that automation can handle the processes. I think what's also difficult about brownfield is the fact that you can walk into pretty much any two McDonald's, Burger Kings, what have you, and they're not the same. So I've had the opportunity since being acquired by Middleby to go on a number of tours and really get into the different restaurants. And you won't have the same hood structure. You have a different clearance between the fryers. You have different fryers. You have Henny Penny fryers, or you have Middleby Pitco fryers. And you might have one at one store and another one at another store. So how do you interface into that? And I do think that Dave and his company at Miso have done some interesting stuff along that line.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I mean, we've tackled the brownfield. I hadn't heard that expression, but the harder aspects of this up front on purpose, right? Because when you break through that, you're then looking at the ability to help this problem at scale everywhere, right? And so that's what really we mean by traditional robotics. Vincent's talk, for those of you that saw it from Google, is really showing how the state-of-the-art of robotics is enabling us for the first time to actually look at environments like existing kitchens and say, you know what, this is actually possible. And when we get there, the opportunities are really very, very large.
So I want to just real quickly give people an understanding, some context for you, Sean. You work with a company called L2F, Lab2Fab, which is acquired by Middleby. Very quickly, kind of 30 seconds, explain to people what you do.
What I do, or
what Middleby does, what L2F does.
So L2F, we started out, actually, co-founder Derek Peets is somewhere in the room there, working with Sweetgreen now. We started out.
Someone wrote an article about that.
Yeah, we saw yours. It was very popular. We started out the company to help hardware innovators move from laboratory stage to full-scale fabrication, focusing on really high-tech stuff in solar, semi, a number of industries. At a certain point, we found ourselves having the number one company in 5 different verticals, and our board of directors said, you guys need to focus. And that was about 3 years ago, and we decided to focus in on food after looking at our different market spaces. We were instrumental in getting Zoom Pizza to market. We were instrumental in getting Cafe X to market. We were doing food processing, chocolate factories, cup of noodles, and Middleby kind of stumbled into us, and we agreed pretty quickly that we had to be on the same team. And so 2017 October, we were acquired very quietly, no press releases, any of that. And then
I looked. There was nothing out there.
Nothing, I know. And that was on purpose. For those that follow our company, the prior acquisition of QualServe was relatively disruptive to the market as far as the messaging, and we were in the same line as them. And then B, we weren't ready to release who we were to the rest of the market. We were still working with Elon Musk and his companies. So it took us all the way until this past year to ramp down a number of multi-million-dollar projects.
Chocolate, hamburgers, coffee, this vertical you honed in on. What are some lessons you learned? I mean, if you can extract from that and kind of plugging yourself into high-volume work environments across those different food types, is there like one or two bits of knowledge or lessons you really learned from that?
From the prior work?
Yeah, it can be applicable to all those different food types, right? Because you seem like to excel across all those spaces.
Well, no, I think that's the precise reason why we had to generate some focus. It's not that easy. There's a lot of different stuff. And so one of the challenges since being acquired by Middleby is everybody wants a robot, but everybody wants the robot to do something different. And so talking to them, the robot's not going to be cost effective unless we can produce the system at scale. So it's finding opportunities within the marketplace that can fit the needs of multiple people. And that's what we're up to right now.
Yeah, no, Sean's absolutely right. I mean, that literally is the thesis behind why Miso is built the way Miso was built. From the very beginning, it needed to be a platform. We needed to come up with a generalizable approach to food automation in order to get the utilization and the economics to drive down the cost of these systems, and then obviously to create the opportunities on both labor savings, but also on improvements in our ability to deliver food, tasty food, and at prices that are accessible. And so we do that in a number of different ways with our cloud-connected learning platform, leveraging something we call Miso C, allows us to look in these existing environments and train our systems in a relatively fast time frame, like less than a week, to understand a particular piece of kitchen equipment and how to orient itself around it and work with it. I kind of like to say that commercial kitchens are sort of Pareto automated already because they are micro-manufacturing facilities. So the first 80% of the problem has been solved for human hands. And Miso is trying to Pareto the Pareto. So do that next 80% of generalizable automation. And again, in existing footprints, and increasingly our technology is being asked to be adapted in new greenfield opportunities as well.
One of the things I want to talk about is this idea of like, okay, and some people kind of nipped at it a little bit in the other panels, but when you're in a high volume restaurant, right, and like you're down in LA, you have your implementation in Oregon or Washington, and it breaks down. What is the changing nature of like the restaurant business? Is there going to be an IT manager, a robotics manager in different kind of retail footprints in 5 years, or is this something you're just going to have like you just have to be in market with your service guy ready to roll?
No, actually, our it's a really good point. I think we've talked about this on the last panel. I want to reemphasize for this group. Turnover, we've heard about it, all-time high in the restaurant industry, 150%. If you focus around grills and fryers, it's upwards of 300, 400%. So we're dealing with not a job beat, but just a job gap that's just gone. And yet, with Miso, we're envisioning creating systems that can be maintained and serviced by the person who used to take that job. So if we can reimagine the nature of this work, elevate how much that person get paid by increasing their throughput and the amount of impact they're able to make, we can actually make this job attractive again, right? And so increasingly we hear from our operators that kitchen staff has vacated to drive Ubers, so the younger generations aren't finding this something that they think is applicable. And yet, with our deployments at Dodger Stadium, one that you mentioned, we're back cooking there. We've had such great response from the staff there. They're like, hey, this is something we can put on our resume now that we're working alongside industrial robots. Now, of course, we make them simple and easy to work with, but it's just making the job more modern and more interesting.
It's a heavy loaded question from the aspect of we can talk about jobs inside the restaurant, but then also are we going to create more technicians that are handling the robots? My concern right now is there's not enough technicians and robots in general. There's not enough technicians in the United States in general. Trade schools are far and few between today. And so, you know, at L2F, we've commissioned a bunch of robotic systems. We did about 100 in China for consumer electronics. And if one of those robots from a main manufacturer goes down or loses orientation and you have to figure out where the home is, it's an extensive undertaking. It takes a high-level engineer to do it, or it may take equipment from the manufacturer to bring out and take care of it. And if you look at Tesla Motors, one of our customers, they stock extra robots. One of our prior customers, they stocked robots in the back of the house, and they can just bring them and flip them. I don't think McDonald's or others are going to put a robot in the back to roll it out. So it needs to be stable. And we do have to have those jobs. So I think it will create those jobs. I think in general we're going to see that, but I have a very large concern that we're not going to have enough people for those jobs as traditional robots get deployed. So having easier to replace mechanisms is better.
Absolutely. I mean, we have that design in our roadmap at MISO around. So the perfect arm for food service does not currently exist, but we have designed this. With our control stack, where we can do real-time controls. There's no longer a need for these instruments to be precision sub-millimeter accuracy. That's why 6-axis robotic arms are so expensive, right? Is that they're made for industrial manufacturing with high utilization rates, and they're working 24/7. If one goes down, the whole line goes down. Food is chaotic, and in these collaborative environments, we have designed and envisioned versions of arms that get down into the sub $8,000 per unit range, which we've modeled out. Once you get there, we think this really inflects. And there's nothing about, from a first principles perspective, the design that we couldn't make that tomorrow. And to Sean's point, we think a lot about what is the job of the future in working with these systems. And we, again, had talked about this earlier, but if we were to meet the rising demand for prepared food over the next 10 years, we would need 12 million more hands just here in the United States alone, let alone worldwide. So these technologies can take the 3 million existing commercial kitchen workers, reimagine what that job is like, teach them and create systems that are serviceable by them at the edge, potentially even turn it into, say, a gig-style job, right? And give that flexibility since you've handed over the food safety aspects to the robot over time. These are things that we can then scale much faster with that design.
And I was just say, I haven't seen your design. We did talk about it the other day. As far as deploying robotics into the field, being able to swap out an axis and having that capability, I think, is really important, and being able to be simple. And so you'll see that today restaurants are able to handle conveyorized equipment, right? So that's a very simple, typically a variable frequency drive, something that's easy to swap in and out. And I think that's pretty key to get scale and be able to service the equipment. It's actually one of the things, if people are paying attention to the news, we acquired quite a bit. We just acquired Powerhouse Dynamics in Boston. They're a data firm. Nice to hear a lot of data stuff here. One of the things I love about that acquisition is they have a service and support network of HVAC people, which is very, very similar to the support network you need for conveyorized equipment. And so when you look forward and being able to service our customers better as automation hits the field, having those relationships matter, having the types of robots or automation that they can service, I think is key.
And the key here is getting the utilization ratios right so that we can make running a restaurant or the owner of a menu or a recipe profitable again. If we can help scale that at the edge and get better economics, then we can change the equation around the support. Today, restaurant operators are just squeezed on all sides. They're not making any money on delivery. And their equipment suppliers are squeezing them. In general, they can't buy anything that's over $10,000, and there's not enough money being made on that $10,000 sale by the manufacturer to give good service, right? But at MISO, we think about things like frying as a service, flipping as a service, right? When we switch into these new novel models where we can increase throughput and get incentives aligned by every stakeholder in the system and improve margins, now we can start building the technology we need, the hardware we need, and the supply chain we need to elevate the quality of food and the nature of the work associated with providing that.
Yeah. I do want to go to the audience for questions. I have one more. I think you're probably traditional model certainly for Middleby, possibly for you. Yours may be a little bit different. Is selling equipment and then servicing it, but it isn't a typical like a SaaS model. But I'm curious, as you go more into robotics, maybe kind of higher end systems that involve kind of white glove service, are you looking at changing the Middleby model at all, or do you think the Middleby business model will change as you go more into robotics?
It's already changing. So if you look at the biggest acquisition we've done is Taylor Company, $1 billion acquisition last year. Taylor has ice cream, a huge market share in ice cream. You're pretty much guaranteed to be eating your soft serve ice cream off of a Taylor. and cleaning ice cream machines is a pain in the butt. And so they've had a 14-day heat treat one out for a long time. We're now working on the 30-day heat treat life cycle, and if you buy the 30-day version, they're going to service it for you. They're going to clean it for you. If you look at what we're doing at L2F, we just deployed a bunch of high-end equipment, combi oven, impinged conveyor oven, nitroless, tankless, nitro brew coffee, plus a robot into a cafe in Pleasanton, and we worked out a profit-sharing deal with them. And so there's no way they could have afforded what we did. Now, on the flip side, look, we're not looking to make money out of this location. We're looking to learn with them, too, overall. So a little bit of a difference, but still, we're going in and saying, yeah, how can we help you improve your business? How can we help you be better at what you do or focus on what you do best? In the case of a mom and pop, it's servicing the customers, reaching out to the community, making the best-in-class sandwich in the little town. It is not doing supply chain. It is not doing payroll and all these other business aspects that come along. And so how can we make that all smarter and easier for them? Certainly how we're looking at it.
Dave, did you know your business model going in, or as rubbers met the road, you figured it out more and fine-tuned it?
Oh, no. From the very beginning, our vision was to try to pioneer robotics as a service. It's just very attractive when you have a platform and your ability to continue to go to places and jobs where you can take the same hardware stack and utilize in other places. One last comment I wanted to make on that Taylor mentioned, we do see in MISO a tremendous opportunity around fry oil management in conjunction with our system as we're frying at Dodger Stadium 17,000 pounds of chicken tenders and tots. We did last season. We're back cooking now. They're full-time, back of house, and so we are seeing savings on fry oil. We don't burn any food because it's perfectly consistently cooked every time. And again, it's an aspect of work that everyone in the stand that works there raised their hand and said, I'm happy to step aside and be utilized in other more customer-facing ways.
We have time for one or two questions. Anyone out there with a question for these guys? Oh.
Hey guys, a quick question for you guys on manufacturing at scale. So after you have your first couple iterations of your robot and you really want to stamp this thing out, how do you guys actually get to the right kind of, how do you work with manufacturing to get the volume that you want and also really optimize the unit economics?
You're at scale. For us, for sure. Not on the, right. So like I said, there is no ARM today that's perfect for this service. Clearly we're talking to folks inside Foxconn and places that have experience at doing low-cost actuators at scale. And so partnerships with people like Aero or Flex, all make sense as part of building out the supply chain. And, again, for these types of things, I think it looks less like a highly expensive and highly reliable industrial manufacturers to make these things and more like working with toy manufacturing, right? Because we have the real-time control software that enables us to work with things that have much less accuracy and are easy to replace and low-cost components. So I think you'll see increasing the supply chain moving to lower and lower cost manufacturing techniques.
Yeah, so I look at it where people in this space are either going to have to be extremely well funded. If they're a startup, to be able to do that scale, you have to give a certain order with the Foxconn and stuff, right, to get it going. Or it's companies like Middleby or some of our competition that we have a pretty sizable bank and we can offset some of the costs early on in order to deploy the products out there. If you look specifically to us, we have manufacturing around the world, 440,000 square feet in Arkansas. There's plenty of places that we could manufacture internally. That being said, we're not a motor manufacturer, right? So we're going to go find the motor manufacturers to work with and stuff like that, buy off the shelf wherever we can.
We can squeeze one more in if there's one more urgent question out there. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, you talked about robots as a service and talked about how it's better for the customer to pay month by month. And when I first launched Robotics, I used to talk a lot about what I call the SaaS model, salad as a service model. But how do you handle the cash flow issues of that? Because if you're a small startup, you're getting money from investors. You don't want to put the investor money into financing the cost of the machines and get paid out over 36 months or 5 years. We found solutions to that, but curious to see what you folks are thinking of.
Yeah, I'll take it on our end. It's clearly a combination of debt and inventory financing on that front. And again, in general, part of our funding strategy is to partner with investors with connections into these supply chains because the technology we're building is so strategically valuable. We've not had much problem finding funding sources to help offset, on the equity raise side. Does that help you?
Well, thanks a lot, guys. This has been great. Give them a round of applause.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with David and Sean. I learned a lot. I hope you did. One final note before we go. We're actually going to be changing the name of the podcast from the Smart Kitchen Show to the Food Tech Show, brought to you by The Spoon. Part of the reason is we just talk about a lot of things on this, including things like the future of the connected kitchen, but also restaurants, robotics, new proteins, the future of delivery, all sorts of things. And we just thought the name needed to reflect what we talk about. So that's really it. Nothing will change. Just stay subscribed to the podcast. You'll just see a different icon, a different logo, and it'll be called something a little bit different. But other than that, we're not making a whole lot of changes. So keep on listening, and we hope you keep enjoying the podcast. Thanks, everyone.